guys, and welcome back to my channel. So I really apologize if there's like a lot of noise in the background. My neighbors are throwing like this massive rooftop party across the street, and it's been going on now for hours, and it is so loud, and I've been trying to film this, and I think it's finally quieted down enough so I can get this out. But yes, I'm really sorry if you hear their party in the background. They suck. Anyway, today I do want to talk about something that I am super passionate about, and that is Southern horror and Southern Gothic. Today I think I only really have like one like traditionally Southern Gothic book on this list, and the rest are all going to be Southern horror. But horror set in the South, and just stories in general set in the South, are some of my favorite stories. I love Louisiana, I love Georgia. I have a lot of really fun books that all take place in the American South, and I just want to talk about how much I love them and how pivotal just Southern culture, as well as like the atmosphere of the South, plays so well into so many horror stories and horror tropes. So let's dive in. Okay, so up first, and please apologize my sticker on this. I gotta take these off, but I always forget. This is one of my favorite classic lit stories ever. This is As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. Faulkner is a master of the macabre and a master of like very deep, dark, depressing, very Southern Gothic. While I don't think I would ever consider As I Lay Dying a horror story, the entire story is about a funeral procession, and it is very bleak, very well done, and I read this entire thing in one setting when I first got my hands on it. I absolutely adore it. I'm gonna read the back for y'all. As I Lay Dying is Faulkner's harrowing account of the Bundren family's odyssey across the Mississippi countryside to bury Addie, their wife and mother. Narrated in turn by each of the family members, including Addie herself, as well as others in the community, the novel ranges in mood from dark comedy to deepest pathos. This is one, like I said, one of my favorite Southern Gothic stories ever. This is one of my favorite classic lit stories ever. It's very depressing. It's very unique, and it's told through multiple perspectives of Addie's entire family, going kind of over her life and how they got to where they are and why they are having the funeral procession in the way that they do. I don't want to give too much away for this, but this is, I think, in my opinion, one of the strongest opening scenes in a novel ever. I really love the character Cash. She's always stuck with me, and I highly think anybody who's really into horror should read Faulkner. If you've ever read A Rose for Emily, that was my first introduction to William Faulkner, and I found it to be one of the most deeply disturbing short stories I've ever read, and kind of just had me hooked on his writing since then. Unlike like Absalom and The Sound of the Fury, As I Lay Dying is very simple language, very easy prose, very well done, and I think you will just speed through it. It's really short. It's like 261 pages, and it's just absolutely amazing. So 10 out of 10, have to recommend William Faulkner on this list. Okay, next up, I did just read this book. This is actually what inspired me to write this, or to craft this list. And this is Gone to See the Riverman by Christopher Triana. This is set in Alabama, so we have Mississippi and then Alabama. This is one of the most deeply unsettling books I think I've ever read, and also thoroughly enjoyed. Enjoyed feels like the wrong word to use because the subject matter of the story is so wrong, like just morally wrong. This does borderline a little bit on cosmic horror as well, but the entire thing is pretty much set on the riverbank in a small town in Alabama, with some very questionable cast of characters. And I also sped through this book. I think I read it in 2 days, and I just also absolutely want to share this story because even though you really need to be prepared for what is in this book, even though it is only like 200 pages, not even, it is so well written that I do think it is worth the read. I'll read the back really quickly. Superfans, groupies, stalkers. These people will give anything for the idols they worship, be they rock stars, actors, or authors, or even serial killers. Laurie's obsession is with Edmund Cox, who was convicted of butchering more than 20 women. She will do anything to get close to him, so when he gives her a task, she accepts. She has no idea of the horror that awaits her. Edmund says that she must go to his cabin in the woods and retrieve a key to deliver to a mysterious figure known only as the Riverman. She brings along her sister, and the trip becomes a surreal nightmare, one that digs up Laurie's personal demons, the one she feels bonds her to Edmund. Soon she will learn the Riverman is not quite fact or folklore, and definitely not human, at least not anymore. This is a really, really well done atmospheric story too. You really do feel like you were in like the riverbank of rural Alabama, and I just absolutely adored the whole setting and ambiance of this novel. It is, again, a very, very deeply disturbing book, but the overall Southern setting was just so pivotal to this plot making sense. The characters, where they come from, their background, their culture, like, I loved absolutely everything about the setting of this story, and I don't think it could have taken place not set on the riverbanks of the South and had the same effect that it does. There's even a character in here who just loves to like play his guitar and is just really into folk music, and I thought that was, well, actually there's several characters who just really want to play their guitar and are really into folk music, and I thought that was awesome. And the Southern setting of this story absolutely elevates this tale, and if you are prepared for some extreme horror, this is definitely a great, great Southern story to read. Okay, I've spoken briefly about the elementals on my channel before. This is by Michael McDowell. This is set in Alabama, I believe. I do not like this book, but I know a lot of people do, and I do believe that it is wrong to talk about Southern Gothic and Southern horror without talking about Michael McDowell, who's pretty much one of the pivotal writers in contemporary Southern Gothic and Southern horror. I'm going to read the back of this really quickly. After a bizarre and disturbing incident at the funeral of matriarch Marion Savage, the McCrae and Savage families look forward to a restful and relaxing summer at Beldam on Alabama's Gulf Coast, where 3 Victorian houses rise above the shimmering beach. 2 of the houses are habitable, while the third is slowly and mysteriously being buried beneath an enormous dune of blindingly white sand. But though long uninhabited, the third house is not empty. Inside, something deadly lies in wait. Something that has terrified Daphne Savage and Lucre McCrae since they were boys, and which still haunts their nightmares. Something horrific that may be responsible for several terrible and unexplained deaths years earlier, and is now ready to kill again. So one of the reasons I will talk about this book, again, I do not care for this book. I found this very, very overrated. I did not find it scary, but the setting and the atmosphere are there. The other thing that I think is really, really interesting, and this is what I do want to highlight, is Michael McDowell wrote Beetlejuice, like the Tim Burton film. And a lot of what he put into Beetlejuice, you can see almost as like a precursor draft in here. The character India is 100% like a precursor to the development of Lydia Dietz. And I think reading the book from that perspective is really, really cool to see where McDowell originated a lot of ideas that he would then put into one of the most famous films he's ever worked on. So I will say that that is definitely one reason to read this book. I don't love it. It is, though, very, very short. It's about 200 pages. And it is set on the Alabama coast in some beautiful Victorian mansions. And if you're into Victorian architecture, they do go into what the houses look like, and I thought that was really cool. But again, I have to throw this in here because I do think it's important to talk about Michael McDowell as a Southern writer, but I am not a fan. Will I give him another chance? Probably. I'll probably eventually read the Blackwater Saga, eventually, but was not thrilled with the Elementals. Okay, next up, Devil's Creek by Todd Keisling. I really like Todd Keisling. I think he's a really fun writer. I think he writes humans very well, as in he writes humanity very well. I really like the inner turmoils that we face with the struggles of his main characters. I think this book does a really, really great job of this. And if you're into cults, this book is all about cults. This is also cosmic horror, but it's cosmic horror that I like, and that's very, very rare. So let's read the back. So it says, "Give us that old-time religion. About 15 miles west of Stalford, Kentucky, lies Devil's Creek. According to local legend, there used to be a church out there, some of the Lord's Church of Holy Voices, a death cult where Jacob Masters preached the gospel of a nameless God. And like most legends, there's truth buried among the roots and bones. In 1983, the church burned down following a mass suicide. Among the survivors were Jacob's 6 children and their grandparents, who banded together to defy their former minister. Dubbed the Stalford Six, these children grew up amid scrutiny and ridicule, but their infamy has faded over the last 30 years. Now their ordeal is all but forgotten, and Jacob Masters is nothing more than a scary story told around campfires. For Jack Tremblay, one of the six, memories of that fateful night have fueled a successful art career and a lifetime of nightmares. When his grandmother Imogen dies, Jack returns to Stalford to settle her estate. When he finds waiting for him are secrets Imogen kept in his youth, secrets about his father and the church, secrets that can no longer stay buried. The roots of Jacob's buried God run deep, and within the heart of Devil's Creek, something is beginning to stir. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed this book. This is the second book I've read from Todd Kiesling. The first was Scanlines, which is a novella, which is definitely more on the disturbing side and kind of hard to stomach, but I really, really enjoyed this. This is very much gonna borderline on like small town religious fanaticism. Cults are very, very pivotal to the storyline. I thought it was done very uniquely, very well done. You can kind of tell that cosmic horror is going to be a big player in this story, but it doesn't come out of nowhere at the very end, which is one of the things I hate about cosmic horror. Yes, you will be left with some unanswered questions, which again, cosmic horror, that's kind of what they do. Not always my favorite thing, but again, in this book, I think it works really, really, really well through the lens of the cult that this story focuses on. Another great story that focuses on like old southern houses. There is one big southern house at the center of this story, and I always think of True Blood with like Sookie Stackhouse's grandmother's house. When I was reading that was like the house that I saw. I know that this is in Kentucky and that's in Louisiana, but I thought that that's the house that I see. I really, really love those old southern houses. Just they're huge, they have all this land around them, and they look so cool, and that is definitely pivotal to this. This whole book almost entirely is set in Kentucky, and I thought this was fabulous. And definitely a different one. I like the cosmic horror balancing of like small town hysteria. I thought that was really, really well done. And again, the setting plays such a pivotal role in this book that you gotta read it for that southern setting. So the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. Most of Grady Hendrix' novels tend to be very focused on the South, mainly because Grady Hendrix is from Charleston, South Carolina. So lo and behold, this is set in Charleston, South Carolina. Out of all the Grady Hendrix books I've read, this is probably my second favorite. My Best Friend's Exorcism is definitely my first, which is also set in South Carolina and Charleston as well, but is not as Southern focused as this one is. This is set in the 90s as well, which is awesome. You get those like real throwback vibes. There are some problematic scenes towards the end in this novel. This is a 4-star read for me, and the problematic scenes really took me out of this book, but beyond that, this is great, this is fun, this is campy, this is scary, and it is so rooted in like upper class Southern society in the 90s, and it's just a very, very unique book, so let's read about it. In every book we read, no one ever thought anything bad was happening until it was too late. Patricia Campbell's life has never felt smaller. Her husband is a workaholic, her teenage kids have their own lives, her senile mother-in-law needs constant care, and she's always a step behind on her endless to-do list. The only thing keeping her sane is her book club, a close-knit group of Charleston women united by their love of true crime. At these meetings, they're as likely to talk about the Manson family as they are about their own families. One evening after book club, Patricia is viciously attacked by an elderly neighbor, bringing the neighborhood's handsome nephew, James Harris, into her life. James is well-traveled and well-read, and he makes Patricia feel things she hasn't felt in years. But when children on the other side of town go missing, their deaths written off by local police, Patricia has reason to believe James Harris is more of a Bundy than a Brad Pitt. The real problem? James is a monster of a different kind, and Patricia has already invited him in. Little by little, James will insinuate himself into Patricia's life and try to take everything she took for granted, including the book club. But she won't surrender without a fight, in this blood-soaked tale of neighborly kindness gone wrong. I had so much fun with this book. My stepdad's from South Carolina. He's from Charleston. So reading this, you could just see Charleston. Like, I think Grady Hendrix really, really nails the setting. Like I said, I have some problems with the subject matter in this book and some of the, like, more grotesque, over-the-top horror gore scenes in this book. Not that I dislike gore, but I just think that there is one scene in particular in this book that went a little too far and was very unnecessary. But I will say that the setting is the absolute shining point of this story. Again, it's Grady Hendrix, so it's easy to read. It's very campy. The prose is straightforward. But he absolutely nails the small town, or like the small city of Charleston. And every time I read this, it just makes me want to go back to Charleston. And I thought this was very, very well done. Very, very fun. And very unique. Grady Hendrix is one of those writers. If you haven't seen, I have a whole author spotlight on him that I'll link up above. But he writes a type of horror that I really, really vibe with, where it doesn't take itself too seriously, but at the same time is still very scary, gory, unsettling, and then also balanced with a lot of humor. So he's an interesting writer, and I think that that tone really, really shines in this novel. And last but not least, I have The Boatman's Daughter by Andy Davidson. This came out, I believe, in 2020, like right at the beginning of the pandemic. This is one of the most beautifully atmospheric books I've ever read. I devoured this book. This was either a 3 or 4 star rating for me because the ending really fell off for me. Like, I was not enthralled with the ending, but you read this book for the southern atmosphere. This takes place in like the swamps of Texarkana, which is Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana, like that whole little like area where they meet, and was just gorgeously swampy, beautiful, all like on boats and small towns, and I just adored this. And it gets really into like Russian folklore, which is weird. Like Leshy is in here. I think it's a Leshy, right? Lots of like kind of like Russian folklore in this, but set in Texarkana. And I thought that was really cool. And I was like very, very invested in the folklore in this novel. So I will read the back for y'all. Alone since her father was killed when she was just a child, Miranda Crabtree has kept her head down and her eyes up, ferrying contraband for a mad preacher and his declining band of followers to make ends meet and to protect an old witch and a secret child from harm. But dark forces, both human and supernatural, are at work in the bayou, conspiring to disrupt the rhythms of Miranda's peculiar and precarious life. When the preacher makes an unthinkable demand, it sets Miranda on a desperate, dangerous path, forcing her to consider what she will sacrifice to keep her loved ones safe. And yes, I do believe it's a Leshy. I have to double check that. But this was really, really beautiful. I really liked the style of writing. I how easy this book was to read. But again, the highlight of this story was truly how amazing the crafting of the atmosphere was. You read this and you felt like you were in a bayou. Like, out of all of the books on this list, I have to say this has the strongest atmospheric setting. Again, not the best ending in the world, but I wouldn't recommend it for the story, to be honest. The story's fun, it's interesting, it's unique, you get really into folklore, but it's the setting that I was so, so drawn to with this, and I am so, so pleased. This was actually an Unplugged book box book. So, like I always say about Unplugged, sometimes their horror picks are really solid, and this was definitely one that I was absolutely thrilled with. This book, I think, is actually what convinced me to like really keep subscribing to Unplugged and to like really dive into that box, because this just blew me away. It came with another book that we got called Prosper's Demon, which was also phenomenal. It was a short little novella through like the lens of a demon, and I adored that. But the atmosphere, the setting in this was top notch. Definitely the one that makes you feel most like you are in small town Southern America right on the bayou, and adored that. Anyway, those are all of the books that I have for y'all today. I absolutely love Southern settings in horror. I have a bunch of Southern books that I have read, so I'll probably do a part 2 for this. I'm reading one right now that I'm devouring, set, I believe, also in Louisiana, and it's just fantastic. So I will definitely probably do another one of these lists very, very soon. And I will try and get some more like traditionally Southern Gothic stories thrown in here as well. We'll get there eventually. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. As always, I post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays, and I will catch you all in the next one. Wow.